Thank you very much. Thank you very much. As I begin, I just want you to know that we're going to be moving to talk a lot in this country about healthy lifestyles and best health practices. I have two balls I brought from China. I shouldn't say it like that. I have these two objects I brought from China. The Chinese in the audience, this is yin and yang. And it's all about balance. And it's a story to be told about a strong man and a strong woman and how you balance. Having said that, I'm happy to be here for a number of reasons. In my trip to China, one of the visits we made to a corporate entity was to one that has moved from using and renting medical equipment to inventing medical equipment. And I toured a facility where they had the MRI and the CAT scan and the PET scan, all of the latest equipment that were being exported to the United States of America. And they spoke about having large numbers of scientists in different parts of the world, of different nationalities in their employ. And they spoke about this substantial jump in sales in their equipment. And at the end of it, I just asked them, if I were to speak to your government about accessing this equipment, would I be able to do so and bring them to the Bahamas, and if necessary, one or two technicians with them, pending our familiarization, etc., etc., etc. I want to begin my speech that way by saying, I'm not a doctor. I'm not one of you. But I'm the son of a nurse whose life was influenced heavily and dependent upon her relationship with doctors. Secondly, when the medical profession had reached a certain stage in its anxiety over some difficulties of senior registrars becoming consultants, they went to see the then political leader of the country to complain. He told them if they waited a few months, he might be able to bring relief for them. After the general elections, I was invited to become the Minister of Health. The person inviting me, the Right Honorable Sir Lyndon Pinling, knew my best friends were doctors. And I went into the office, sat down, called the permanent secretary in, and one by one, Nottage, Sands, Gomez, they became consultants in accordance with the power vested in the Minister of Health. That is absolute truth. Percy McNeil, the ENT man, Max Campbell, one by one. But they were all Bahamians who had returned home with specialties that was manifestly in the best interest of the people of this country. They all have distinguished themselves in their contribution to the medical profession and set the standard for Conville and those and Robin and those who came afterwards. With respect to stem cells, I went to a conference in Las Vegas, just happened to be there and walked into this big hall where they were having discussions on longevity and life extension. I was fascinated by it because as you get older, you're looking for help. all of us, naturally. And science has made some remarkable inventions and introductions to making men smile, as you all would appreciate. And so I was walking around, and I came across a session that was speaking about stem cells. And interestingly enough, when I returned home, I read in the papers about Dr. Brown and his cardiovascular intervention, stem cells. I noted it. We became the government and found that there was an advanced process of Okeanos being given a license. And I told my cabinet colleagues that thankfully I had the experience of being a former Minister of Health. And that one of the greatest tragedies for me as minister was that we had entities in Grand Bahama who were providing last hope opportunities for people who were dying. That they had a treatment for cancer, that they could come in and be treated, and we had the specter of people coming in and leaving in body bags. And it attracted the international press. And I told my colleagues, as Prime Minister, newly installed, we were not going to do that. I said they were dead wrong, all of them in the Ministry of Health, for involving themselves in a complex aspect of science that if they did research, they would find in Thailand they were outlawed, and they would find jurisdictions that had to stop and recalibrate and start all over again because it was suspect in terms of the commercialization of what is a science. I can try and use this speech. I was talking to them about whether or not I can make a prepared speech. All right, but I want to make this point to you all that I can't, the reason why I was late is I stopped, they told me they wrote a speech for me, I stopped to look in my office and see if I could find it. I found it after a while. And I read it, and I think I should say something about what they said here. But they didn't write what I'm talking about now. And I'm talking about the legitimacy of a jurisdiction using an export of health services, meaning people coming in to get it. Cornwell Brown had prepared a presentation which presented itself to me as a research paper. It was wrapped around a man by the name of Richard Stack, Professor Richard Stack, formerly Dean of the Medical School at Duke University. And it had a bevy of scientists, a group of scientists connected with it, who had either passed through Duke University, but the Dean of Stanford University, the Dean of Singapore University, the Dean of Penn State, a bevy of scientists, which put into context, this was not a jokey matter. This was not a matter to be driven by dollars and cents. The preparation that he put in enabled me to speak in the region as a prime minister about what exists. And when applications or applicants came in to talk about stem cell and medical schools, the paper that he had prepared enabled me to have a level of knowledge and participation where one would have regarded me as someone who understood the path to where the Bahamas ought to be going. And so I said, let us find a way to find a model legislative regime that we could follow. Let us look to our lawyers in Washington, our lawyers in Canada, and let us come up with legislation that could stand the test of scrutiny. We will not proceed without having legislation and regulations to define what we were doing. That was the sense. I then met the the owner of Genting, K.T. Lim, who told me he spent millions annually in investing in medical research. And he began to tell me that they thought in their research and the scientists he was dealing with that they had found the answer to dementia, Alzheimer's, and that they were applying to the FDA for trial periods. And of course, I then started clicking quickly because we were talking about results. And when he found out I was intensely interested in this subject from the point of medical tourism, he told me he was going to make a call and fly someone out to meet me. And he did so at a birthday gathering we had on Paradise Island, where it was his birthday. And he flew out Clive Venter with the genome theory, breaking genetic code. And what interested me about it, they said that when he announced that they had come up with this, they had a call from President Obama and from the Pope asking about this. I have since had discussions with a number of such people connected to Dr. Venter, one of whom is a major, the most, I think, significant investor in medical research, who's partnering Venter, and they are connected to the University of San Diego, California, and the dean of that medical school. And this particular investor is a neurosurgeon with the means to own his own jet aircraft and fly them. Comes out of Vietnam, but he invests $1 billion a year in drug research with considerable success. And he then said to me, could we participate in the regime that you're going to create? Because we would not wish to come into a country where we cannot influence how you go about accepting people, just like the good doctor here, who came in as a potential investor and who has agreed to be a part of helping provide what I call the legitimacy to the jurisdiction. This becomes important. This particular grouping indicated to me that they would come into the Bahamas provided the FDA understood they were doing so, and therefore there was no association with an illegitimate jurisdiction. That the FDA, the Federal Drug Administration of the United States of America, would know what they're doing. And they said they would establish themselves in Bimini. Because K.T. Lim is the owner of Genting. They've spent some $500 million already down there in Bimini. You got to go and see it to believe it. And that they would add this dimension to it. And what's significant about it is this, because they are connected to one of the major sporting groups of the United States of America that has a concern about their players post-retirement, and therefore they are being engaged by that association to determine the best way to deal with concussion, post-retirement, etc., matters of that kind. But sort of not just the cardiovascular intervention, but neurological interventions, orthopedic interventions. And therefore, it lent itself to me of being an incredible opportunity for the Bahamas. And so I knew that Dr. Gomez, Dr. Nottage, Dr. Darville, who was in my cabinet, Dr. Johnson, all of these people associated with medicine, I knew that they understood the necessity for us to be seen to have the right regime. And that is why I am so pleased that when I went to the University of Miami, this notion we have in the Bahamas that we are small and therefore must allow our size to influence how we think. I got to tell you, Conville Brown never believed that. No, I say that to his credit, because whatever degree of success he's had or he hasn't had, he thinks big. And that's what you have to do. When I met these people, I told Dr. Gomez, I'm going to assemble the leadership of the University of Miami, and I'm going as Prime Minister. And I assembled the medical fraternity there, led by Dr. Goldsmith, the dean. He told me about a Bahamian young lady who was specializing, and she was a former athlete and all those wonderful things. I told him I come to do some business. That I wanted an association with the University of Miami. That I had people applying to us for a medical school. That I'm connected to the University of West Indies, but notwithstanding that, I have to deal with applications of people who want to do in medical school. And let me just say this, because they got two of these fellows here to take responsibility. The medical school in Grenada came to the Bahamas first. I was Minister of Health. And they applied at medical school for St. George's to be here. The brothers who were my principal advisors and who I just made consultants concluded that I shouldn't agree. That we were not ready for it. As Prime Minister, as Minister of Health, I had to go in the Caribbean and watch this school move through the ages, and I was a part of the group that accredited the school as a medical school, and it was probably bought for $1 billion by one of the American companies. Now look, the only point I make is I forgive them for that. Okay? But I decided, and this is important to the medical profession here, we have a country offshore United States of America. I have a view, given the experience I have in public life now, that we ought not to have the challenges in our country today that we have. It's a view that I'm going to speak very strongly to our friends in America over the next several days when I meet them, because I was able to speak in the same way to President Raul Castro in Cuba and to President Xi in China. Our country has the opportunity to make a massive jump forward in every which way if we could just get it together. A group came in from the Caymans to meet with us. They have a hospital in the Cayman. They said they would want to, with immediate effect, put one here. I didn't bother to consult on the matter because we were in the middle of a lot of things. Grand Bahama needs a new hospital. There are half a dozen groups who, on a public-private partnership basis, would build it, including in one of the American hospitals. I said to the University of Miami representative today, I want to come over there now because I need to get, I told Dr. Nottage now, the Ministry of Health and the new Chief Medical Officer, I need to infuse some excitement into them. I'm talking hard talk now. See, I need to be able to get them to know that if I go into a particular place and I set the foundation for it, they got to follow it up and make it happen. See, I'm not exaggerating to you in terms of the possibilities for